today, this Tuesday morning, and I'm trying to get my camera adjusted there. So, since we started this, Pastor Nathan does a teaching on Thursday. My teachings, I've kind of skipped around and honestly just followed certain themes. But kind of when I was praying, just meditating on the Lord this past week, I felt impressed to just go back to the Gospels. And so that's what I'm going to do starting today. We're just going to spend a few weeks, maybe a few months in the Gospels. It's rich, not only with the stories of what Jesus did, but his teachings as well, and many, many truths concerning his deity and that we'll find there. But I'm going to start today with Matthew chapter 1. It's the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And for those of you that read the Old Testament, you get into all the begats, so-and-so begat so-and-so, and he begat so-and-so. And it can get a little frustrating and maybe a little boring at times. And the same might be said of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, unless you're paying attention. And I want to show you some things that the Lord has just spoke to my heart over the years when I look at this, because there are some things that are out of place in this genealogy. There are some things that's not, I'll just follow along with me. All right, we'll begin reading chapter 1, the book of Matthew, verse 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram. Verse 4, Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Verse 7, Solomon begot Rehoboam. Rehoboam begot Abijah, and Abijah begot Asa. Asa begot Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat begot Joram, and Joram begot Uzziah. Verse 9, Uzziah begot Jotham. Jotham begot Ahaz, and Ahaz begot Hezekiah. Hezekiah begot Manasseh. Manasseh begot Ammon, and Ammon begot Josiah. Josiah begot Jeconiah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begot Shealtiel. Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel begot Abiud. Abiud begot Eliakim, and Eliakim begot Azor. Azor begot Zadok. Zadok begot Achim, and Achim begot Eliud. Eliud begot Eleazar. Eleazar begot Mathan. Mathan begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. Verse 17, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. And from the captivity in Babylon until the Christ are 14 generations. So just looking at that, and as is common with genealogies, most generally it is the male figure who is mentioned. And the same is true in this passage, except for a few exceptions. And you can just glance down through here, Ahaz begot Hezekiah. These are the fathers. These are the men. Hezekiah begot Manasseh. Manasseh begot Ammon. Ammon begot Josiah. But early on in this, Matthew begins in his writing of this genealogy to make exceptions. And you'll notice the first one in verse number 5. It says that Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. So what's interesting about this one is that he includes the name of the mom. So it's not just Salmon, begatting Boaz, but he begot Boaz by Rahab. Rahab is mentioned. So let's talk about Rahab. So who was Rahab? Rahab was in the city that all of us are familiar with. If you've ever sing Christian songs as a child growing up, we know that Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. Now that's the way the song goes. The scripture actually says that they fell flat. But this is a city in which Rahab was born and raised in. She was not a Jew. She was not an Israelite. She did not belong to the family of God. She was basically raised in a heathen nation. But what is interesting is when the children of Israel crossed over the Red Sea and begin their conquest, so to speak, all of these stories begin to circulate among all the nations. But when they sent spies into the promised land, you'll remember the story, 10 came back with an evil report, 2 came back with a good report. But the people of Israel chose to believe the 10 with the evil report, who said, we're not able to take it. Only 2, Joshua and Caleb, said, we are well able, let's go up, let's take it, let's be obedient to God. But because they chose to believe they were not able to, they were doubting God, they were doubting what God had told them to do, they spent another 40 years wandering around Sinai, wandering around in the desert, in the wilderness, until they died off and their children grew up, and then their children 40 years later went in and began to take the promised land. Now, the only 2 that were included in that were Joshua and Caleb. Now, Joshua would become the second leader of Israel, following in Moses' footsteps. Caleb is 80 years old when they finally go into the promised land, and we all know his confession, I'm as strong as I was then, I'm as capable as I was then. And he says to Joshua, give me this mountain. We talk about Caleb, 80 years old and still claiming the promises of God. And so he gets to go in and inherit the promised land. But one of the first cities that they encounter is this city of Jericho. And Jericho, of course, is a walled city. And so they send spies into it. And the spies end up meeting Rahab. Now, Rahab is a woman in this city. She's been raised an unbeliever. However, and probably because of that, she made her living. There's no mention of a husband that she would have had. She made her living by being a harlot. And so anyway, they come in contact with her. She also obviously let out rooms for rent. She did what she had to do to make a living, right? And so they're renting a room. In the conversation, she realizes who they are and she begins to talk to them. And she says, 40 years ago, so she's not a real young woman, but she says, 40 years ago, we heard the stories of what your God did in bringing you across the Red Sea and delivering you, how he fought for you. And she tells them, our hearts were full of terror. We were quaking, we believed. And but they don't believe, the enemy or the people that were not of God, they actually believed the stories of what God had done, whereas the actual children of God did not believe. So they spent another 40 years in the desert. And now the ones coming in are their offspring, their children. But she tells these spies, we believe, and our hearts melted within us. And she said, I know whatever you all do, your God is going to favor you. And so she kind of begs them, asks them, would you spare me and my family? And they make a deal with Rahab. And they say, if you'll put a scarlet thread or probably a cord outside of your window, we'll know that's your house, and whoever's in your house will be saved. And so Rahab does just that. She helps them to hide. She helps them to escape. And they go back and they tell the story. These people are afraid of us. And of course, God gives the plan. They're to march around Jericho, right? Once every day for 6 days. And on the 7th day, they march around 7 times. And then they blow their shofars. The walls come tumbling down. They take the city. And the only people that are spared is Rahab and her family. So she joins up with the Israelites, with the descendants, of Abraham, so to speak, right? And apparently she marries this man. Let me find it again. Salmon, verse 5, Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. And so Rahab, an unbeliever prior to, many people would say she was pagan, but because of her faith in the stories that she had heard about their God, not only is her life preserved, but she becomes a proselyte. She marries into their family, into the nation of Israel. And not only that, brothers and sisters, God uses her to be one of the ones that would bring about the Messiah. She's not a Jew. She's not an Israelite. She's not anything to do with them. As a matter of fact, she was a harlot. Her livelihood, at least we don't know when it stopped, but we know that prior to all of this, her livelihood was made by being the harlot. Men paid her to be able to sleep with her and be with her, right? And I remember the first time, and it was years ago, I was probably still a teenager. I remember maybe early 20s, but somewhere around the time I was getting ready to go to Bible school, or maybe I was already in Bible school, I can't remember. But I remember reading this, and all of a sudden, the reality hit me about this genealogy of Jesus Christ, in the fact that God used, accepted, redeemed, and included Rahab to bring about the Messiah to us. And all of these men that are mentioned in this genealogy, there's a hiccup here. All of a sudden Matthew says, hey, Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. She's included. Her name is included. I don't know what that speaks to you, but I got goosebumps sitting here recording this right now. What it tells me is that God can redeem and he can use any person that he wants to. And we see that in the case of Rahab. But let's go on a little bit. So Boaz, she has a child named Boaz, and then he begot Obed, and here's another hiccup, by Ruth. And then it goes back to just the men for a while. Actually, we'll just follow it out here. Verse 5, Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. So Ruth is mentioned. I think there's only 3 or 4 women mentioned in all of these genealogies, and we looked at 14 generations, and they're the 3 or 4 women that are mentioned. That's significant, right? So what about Ruth? Ruth, again, was not an Israelite. She was a Moabite. And but her mother-in-law and her 2 sons, they left Israel. They left their home country because of financial reasons. And it was in Moab that Mahlon, her husband, meets her. They're married. Well, Mahlon dies. So does her sister was married to his brother, and they both die. And so it's just Ruth now with Naomi. Now, Naomi is from Israel. She's from Judah. And so she tells Ruth, she says, you go ahead and remarry. You're young. You got your whole life ahead of you. I'm going to go back home. And we have the famous scripture that everybody knows. And she says, entreat me. Ruth says to Naomi, entreat me not to leave you, nor to depart from you. Because whithersoever you go, I will go. Whithersoever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So this Moabitess, in being married to Mahlon and obviously having a great relationship with her mother-in-law, has come to faith. So when Naomi goes back to Judah, to Israel, Ruth goes with her. Now both of them are without husband. They have no means of support. And so she would send Ruth out. She would say, go gather in the fields, because as is custom and provided by the law, they will leave a little bit behind, handfuls on purpose. And you can bring those in and we won't starve. Well, the owner of the field that Ruth is working in is a man by the name of Boaz. For those of you that know your Bible, know exactly what happened. He saw her, he's attracted to her, he wants to know more about her. And into the story, they end up getting married. And so once again, here is someone, just as Rahab was not an Israelite, here is a woman who's not an Israelite. She's a Moabitess, and she marries Boaz. But that's not the end of the story. Salmon begat Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. So once again, not only Rahab, but now Ruth, a Moabitess, is included in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Not only included, but mentioned, right? And I just think that's incredible. And so her boy, Obed, he begets Jesse, no wife mentioned there. And then Jesse begot David the king, no woman mentioned. But the next line, David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Once again, a woman is mentioned. Now, it doesn't give her name, but we know it's Bathsheba. Matthew calls her the woman who had been the wife of Uriah. Big, major story. Big, major story in the Old Testament. David sees her. And really, this whole story is not about Bathsheba. She wasn't trying to seduce him. I've heard a lot of speculation people have about her, but the truth of the matter is she didn't even know that he was watching her. And he lusts for her, he sins for her because her husband is out fighting one of his battles where he should have been, but he wasn't. And he calls for her. He's the king. He has power. He has prestige. They sleep together. She sends word to him, I'm pregnant. And so to cover that up, he sends word to Joab, please send Uriah home. And he gets Uriah drunk, thinking he'll go. No, actually, the first time he just thinks Uriah will go be with his wife, and then he'll think the child is hid, sin covered up, right? But Uriah doesn't. And so the next day when David questioned him, why didn't you do this? He says, well, I thought about all my brothers that are out there fighting. They don't have the comforts of home nor the warmth of their wife, and I just couldn't do it, so I slept outside. So the second night, David invites him in for dinner, gets him drunk, thinking now he's drunk and he'll lose his inhibitions, all of his righteousness, and he'll go home, sleep with his wife. He'll think the baby's his. Sin covered up, case solved. But that's not what happens. Again, he goes out. And so David, it's one of his worst moments. He sends word by Joab that he has him put in the front line. They withdraw from him. He's killed in battle. And then David sends for Bathsheba and takes her as his wife. I'm not really here to talk about all the fallout of that story. That's not what this Bible study is about. But that baby dies. But Bathsheba is still his wife, and they have another child, and his name was Solomon. And what does the Bible say? David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Again, this is just incredible to me. David had more than one wife. He had more than one kid, but it's Solomon whom God chooses to be in the genealogy that Christ will come out of. And Solomon is the child of Bathsheba and David. God can do what he wants, and he can use whomever he wants for his glory and for his purpose. And I'm going to close right there today, but can I just encourage you? Some of you think, I don't have anything to offer, or I was raised on the wrong side of the tracks, or I come out of this, I come out of that. Maybe it was addiction, maybe it was sinfulness. It could be any number of things, Surrender your life to God. He can use whoever he wants, however he wants, for his glory. I'm inclined to believe that God is not finished with you yet, and there's still a story to be told in spite of where you came from. Father, thank you for your word today. Thank you for the encouragement that I sense in my heart and the encouragement that I believe is going out to people who are studying your word with me. Lord, there are some of them right now. I believe that thankfulness is beginning to come out of their heart as they realize your story is not over yet. And so we submit ourselves to you and we say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name.